I'm going to talk about creating PowerShell rules using MP Author and kind of do a live demo of just walking through that and show you how easy that is. So the key takeaways I want you guys to take from this session are just kind of understanding that the creating PowerShell-based rules and monitors is a real common authoring need in SCOM, and that there isn't a simple solution that exists today for IT pros because the SCOM console doesn't allow you to use PowerShell, because when Operations Manager first launched, VBScript was kind of still the standard scripting language that everybody used, and that's slowly transitioning over. So I want you to see how MP Author makes this process very simple, and then walk away with an understanding that while we're just going to show rules today, MP Author supports PowerShell discoveries, monitors, and rules. So 3 different types of workflows that are available. So to get started, it's really simple. The most common scenario that I see is customers, often SCOM guys, are asked to create some type of a monitor that a native module doesn't exist for. So it's real simple when we're asked to monitor something in the event log or something in perfmon, or anything that there's a native module for. And if that doesn't exist, we kind of default to script. So sometimes SCOM admins are really good scripters, and sometimes they're not. And so I'm going to go through a scenario of where, like a customer gives us a script and says, hey, I just want SCOM to run this script, and do something with the output. So what we would typically do is we would go through this and take the script and then what I called SCOMify the script. So basically we need to add a few components to the script that SCOM is going to use to leverage its own API and then handle the output. And I'll show that in greater detail. And then once we have that done, we just use MP Author to do the rest. So very straightforward. Let's get started. So in this example that I'm using, you can see this is a really simple script. I'm just counting the files in Windows temp. So I'll show an example of running that here. And then if we just look at, I'm setting that to a variable. And I can see that I counted the files, and I have 822 of those in my Windows temp directory here. So this is about as simple a script as you can get in PowerShell, and I wanted to try to keep it really simple for this example. And so the next steps are basically to take this script and then put in the stuff that's necessary for SCOM. So I'm just going to create a new one here, and I'm going to save it as, I don't want to replace that one, so I'll just add a 1 to this. And I'm going to copy the contents of that script over here. So I'm still counting it. And then basically what we need to do is first load the Operations Manager API. And this is very similar to what we did in VBScript. The syntax is just slightly different. But we're basically loading an API into the variable, and we're just calling on a COM object for the mom script API. So being a good scripter, I'll go ahead and start doing some comments. And I'm loading the script API, and then there's one more thing that we need to add and load at the beginning, and that's basically calling out the concept of property bags. So from the API, I'm loading the create property bag module, and that is going to allow me to output the output of the script in something SCOM knows how to consume. So these are very common. The syntax will be a little bit different sometimes if you're doing discovery versus something like where we're using a property bag for a rule. But essentially you can look those up. They're very, very similar across the board because the mom script API is fully documented. So now that that's loaded, I need to actually create the property bag itself. So I'll come down here. Let's see, and I'll call this the main body of script, all 1 lines of it. And next I'm going to load script output into the API. Yep, property bag. And so what I'm doing here is I'm basically adding the value, and I'm just giving it an arbitrary name, files in temp. That's free text. That can be whatever you want, and you'll see where we use that later. And then I'm taking the $temp count, which is the variable that has the actual numeric value, and I'm adding that to the property bag as the value. So this is very similar to like what we would see for monitor state output or discovery data, where we create this pair where we have some free text of what we define it as and then a value for the output. Now that that's done, the last thing that I have to do is just very simply output this into SCOM. So I'm just outputting the actual property bag. And I'll go ahead and comment that. And there we go. So I can save it and I can execute this entire script, and I can see that it outputs. It doesn't show me the actual data. It shows me that it's a system com object, and that's expected in a PowerShell script like this. If it was a discovery script, I'd actually see an output of discovery data. But this is fairly simple and straightforward. So I could use this script right now as it is, but what I like to do is also add a little instrumentation and logging to this. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new one. And we're going to save this one as enhanced one. I'm going to take that same script that I have and paste it over. And now what I want to do is I want to add some logging. And this is just because anytime I'm adding a script into SCOM, I want to be able to add logging to make sure that the script is working. You can turn this on or off depending on what you like as far as output goes. But since script troubleshooting is a real common scenario, I like to add as much of this as I can. So after the mom script API loads, I can just add a section called logging. And what I'm basically doing is calling on a function called logscriptEvent. And so logscriptEvent is how the SCOM API in PowerShell creates event logs to the SCOM event log. And then I'm basically passing some free text that I'm telling it what the name of the script is. Now, obviously, I've changed that, and I can update that. This is just simply the event ID, so I'm going to change this to 1234. And the next one is the error level, whether it's information or critical or warning in the event. And I'm basically saying, hey, this is the text of the event. I want to say count files in the script is starting, and that's good. And then I'm going to add another one at the end of the script. And so for something so simple as this one, I wouldn't need to write 2 events, but for things that are really complex, you may log lots of events along the way, especially when you're troubleshooting. So, so I'm doing a log script event, and I'm going to call this 1235. And I'm just saying, hey, the script is now complete, and the number of files is, and I'm going to show this from the script output from a a PowerShell variable and dump that. And so, and again, I'm going to comment that as logging. Let's save this. And I can actually run this script right now, and it output that com object. I can come into my event viewer and refresh, and I can see, yep, here's my my first event, 1234. Let me pull this up here. There's my 1234 event that says that the script is starting. And then I logged 1235 event that says, yep, the count is complete for the script, and the number of files is 822. So the script works great. That's all we need to do, and this is now ready to move it into MP Author. So with that, I'll launch my MP Author. And I'm going to create a new management pack. And I need to give the management pack an ID, so this can be anything you want. Usually you'll preface it with company names. You should come up with a standard for that, but for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to call this Demo PowerShell Rule. And then say this is a demo for MPU, PowerShell poser, PowerShell rule, and next. And then where do you want to save it to? So I'll create a new directory to save that to. And then the MP author automatically adds all the standard references, so I don't have to do that optionally. So that's really cool. I'm creating an empty management pack, and I choose finish. So this is now going to load the interface that MP author gives me to see all the different components within my management pack. This is real simple. It's just an empty management pack at this point. So one of the first things I want to do is actually create a folder before I create my rule. And the reason is because I want to create some views as I do this, and they need a parent folder for that. So I'm just going to go and create new folder. And this is under monitoring, so the default is a great place to do it. When it says it's under monitoring, I'm going to uncheck show display names and show you this. It's actually this ID, this Microsoft System Center monitoring view folder root. And what that equates to is in the SCOM console, it's basically a folder directly off this root folder. And so if I wanted to add this to some other management pack, I could reference it and do that. But primarily most of yours are going to be done off of this folder root. So we're just going to accept the defaults there. And this is the ID for my folder. Now, MP author gives you, to try to make everything unique, they give a nice long ID that's going to be very unique. I usually customize these a little bit. And so I'll just call this root folder. And oh, this is actually the display name and what's going to show up in SCOM, so I'm going to leave that just demo PowerShell rule. That looks good, and I'm going to call this folder for my management pack, and we'll move on. And so now that that folder's created, we're ready to create the rule. So I will go into rules here. I can see I don't have any, so I'm going to create a new rule. And they have a built-in capability for a script performance rule. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. And this is based off of PowerShell. Now, they're pretty cool. Most of their workflows, they'll actually detect, based on the script that you provide, they'll detect whether it's VB script or PowerShell and load the appropriate module behind the scenes. So we've already written our script. So I'm just going to go grab that, and here it is. So it's a PowerShell script. And it takes all the text and dumps it right in here. If my script took parameters, which it absolutely can, you can add those here for whatever the parameter names are and whatever value you want to be in there. We need to set a timeout for all scripts to just say, hey, if you can't run this in 60 seconds, just go ahead and cancel it or bomb out. This is such a simple script. If it can't run in 60 seconds, there's a real problem. And then the next one is the performance mapper. Now, the cool thing about creating a script-based performance rule is I have a lot of flexibility. I can pretty much call most of this stuff whatever I want. So I'm just going to call this custom files for my object. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating my own perfmon object, basically. And I want to call my counter like count files in dir. And for my instance, I'm not going to pass a variable. I'm actually going to hard code this. So for this example, I'm just using the temp directory. If I wanted to open this up to a script parameter and have any directory, then what I could do is pass a parameter of the directory and then use a variable here that I would output from the script itself for what directory it was using. So for the value, I'm actually going to use something from my script. So we just have some base data in here as an example, but if I go back and look at my script, what I'm actually outputting in the property vag is this files in temp. And so what I want to capture for that value, this has to match. So I'm going to go grab files in temp here. Whoops, straight out of my script. And then put that and replace the text for name. So there we go. Very, very simple. It's just whatever I'm outputting from the property bag, I need to match that on the value. So I'll go next. And the next step is, what do I want to use as the target for the rule? It defaults to Windows Computer. I'm not a fan of ever targeting Windows Computer except for very specific scenarios. For instance, like discoveries, but for workflows, if I want this to run on everybody, my generic target of choice is usually Windows Server operating system. So I'm going to switch to that. And I need to give the rule an ID and a nice clean display name and all that good stuff. So again, NP Author does this to keep all this unique, and it uses data that we've provided previously in the workflow. I usually like to clean these up for mine. So in this example, I'm just going to call this demo PowerShell rule count files in temp. Let's see, yeah, that looks good. So that's a little cleaner. And for the display name, I'm going to do the same thing. And if I'm creating a rule or creating a discovery or a monitor, I always like to put that on the end of the display name. So if I'm ever searching and I see this workflow, crashing or something like that, I know this is a rule, this is a monitor, this is a discovery, the different types of workflow that it is. So just kind of a little best practice tip there. And then lastly, I'm just going to call this rule to collect files in temp directory via PowerShell. Now, NP Author does some cool things here. It allows me to create some views and actually reports on the fly. So I want to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to choose to create a view. And notice this folder here. It says none. I'm going to pick the folder that I created when I began. If you didn't create your folder first, this wouldn't be an option for you, and you'd have to make that change in XML. So that's why I like to do that first. So I'm going to create the PowerShell root folder, or create this view in the PowerShell root folder. And then by default, a performance collection rule created in NP Author only writes to the ops DB. It doesn't actually save the data to the data warehouse. So if I check this box, that tells it basically to add another write action to save the data to the data warehouse for reporting. That's something that's optional. And then I can also create a linked report. And with this linked report, it just basically builds a simple report that would show the data that I'm interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and do both of those. Those are pretty cool. And then lastly, I need to create a schedule to save this on. So I'm just going to choose periodic, and I want to run this however much time. So for this example, I'm just going to say, hey, let's run this every 60 seconds. And that's it. At that point, it's ready to go and build the management pack and create all the XML from the data that I provided. So I can kind of review this and make sure it looks good and click finish. So my NP, the rule is created. You can see that was really simple, taking a script, putting it into NP Author and creating that. And so the last steps would be kind of deploying that. Before we do that, though, I want to show a couple capabilities with NP Author. So one of the things we can do is run some checks that are commonly missed items. So I can check for missing display names in my management pack. And it would show me if I did have. Another option I have here is to run np verify. So the benefit here is before I ever try to deploy, if I run np verify and there's a problem, I can start fixing it while I'm still in my tool instead of actually trying to send it over to Ops Manager and then getting the errors and messages from it of why it won't import. So that's very cool. And then lastly, I can run the best practices analyzer against this and make sure I didn't do anything really, really bad. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in this example. And I have two choices. I can output this to a web browser or MP Author itself, so I'll just choose MP Author. And what I'm kind of looking for is, do I have any critical issues with my management pack that I need to address before I move it into production or even testing? And as I scan down through here, I do see, I do have a critical issue. My performance collection interval should be higher than 15 minutes. So if I go look at that, it's telling me right here that this rule collects performance at an interval of 60 seconds. It should be set at least to 15 minutes or used to optimize performance collection. So that's great. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to leave it at 60 seconds, but that would show you some examples of, when you create things to kind of run this and make sure you're not knocking yourself into a hole. So I'll click OK at this point, and then we can deploy. So to deploy, I'm just going to right-click at the top and choose to deploy this management pack. And I do need to save it, and that's the management server I want to send it to. Oh, actually, I know this is going to fail because I already have this management pack with a newer version. So I'll show how to increment that. When I go to the root of the management pack, I can see my version is 1001. I'm just going to increment this to 4, save that, and then let's deploy again. So it shows me that I can see that I have this previous version that I've already created, and do you want to go ahead and send this one over to the management group? Yep, so I'm going to go ahead and deploy it. And I get a little green bar down here at the bottom that shows me that it's actually deploying and it's kind of tracking progress along the way. And there we go, successfully deployed my PowerShell rule. Excellent. So while that's actually deploying and hitting the management pack and all that kind of stuff, what I wanted to go through is to take a look at all the XML that MP Author generated so we can kind of understand what it's actually doing behind the scenes. So here's my actual XML. And so as we saw, it creates the empty shell of the management pack with the manifest. It includes all the references that are necessary, and then obviously we can add new ones. I'm going to go ahead and collapse my manifest. And I'm going to collapse these out a little bit so we can kind of see what all was created. And folder items, linked reports. So basically we have a data source module type that got created, a probe action module type, and then a actual rule that we're going to, the rule is going to leverage those, and then a view that we created for the performance data, and a root folder to put our views in. Then we also told it to create a report so we can see that the linked report was created as well. So I'll first start off by taking a look at the rule, and I can see that this rule is calling on a data source, and this data source is the data source module type that's referenced above. For counting files and rules. So this is a custom composite data source, and if I go look at that specific one, I can see the actual member modules are the scheduler, which is telling it how often I want to run this script, and then a probe action that it's calling. And so I can go look at that probe action, which I'll do now. And I can see, this is what it actually created that may be something of what I'm used to. It's using the Windows PowerShell property bag trigger only probe as the module type. So for if anybody's familiar with custom authoring, you know, there's several PowerShell modules that we added in SCOM 2007 R2, and they've been carried forward and enhanced and added to in 2012. And so this is, you know, this was that manual process that you had to go through previously if you wanted to create your own workflows. And then here's the script body that it loaded, and that should look fairly familiar because it's the script that we actually created. So a fairly simple management pack, but quite a bit of XML that gets generated behind the scenes, as you can see. So let's take a look at what it actually created in the console. So if I go into monitoring, I can see, yep, there's my actual rule and my folder. And actually, oh, I forgot one thing in MP Author. I'm going to go through here. By default, these views are tagged as visible false. And so that's something that you need to set if you want these views that you create as you're creating these rules to get tagged as visible in the console. So I'm just going to change this to true. And I'm going to increment my version again, save it, and we're going to deploy that. All right, it's successfully deployed. So now I'm essentially waiting for that update to show up in Operations Manager. And basically when this version increments from 4 to 5, we should be good to go. There we go. Yep. So we can see that the version incremented to my latest version for my demo PowerShell rule. I'm going to kick back over into monitoring, and there's my view that I can see. And here it is. So this is an example of all the items that I'm collecting, and you can kind of see, you know, the rule name that we chose. The object is custom files. The counter is count files in directory. The instance is tempter. Remember, these were all free text, so you can choose what you want to see there. And then we have the performance output, and I can change this and select a time range. So right now I'm just looking at the last hour's worth of data. And I can see that that data is pumping in and collecting for all my agents. So this was just an example of, you know, counting files in a directory, but obviously anytime we just take PowerShell and have it output a numeric, we can use that in a performance collection rule. Some other things that that it did is it created a report. Now I haven't had this in here long enough for this report to start generating aggregations, so it probably doesn't work. We'll see. Yesterday. No, it sure doesn't. Yep. And so then I have a favorite report. Let's see if mine works. So yeah, so the report runs, but it just doesn't show data yet. But essentially, since this is standard performance data, I can just create, you know, a performance top objects, and then just go search for that by counter. And we chose custom files and count files in a directory, and I can search for the rule that actually collects that. And then say, hey, show me everything from yesterday to today, and the time is off a little bit. Let's say 2:28, and run that, see if we get it. Now we still don't have data, so I just haven't had it in. It takes an hour for the aggregations to run, for the performance data to actually show up in my reports here. So, but that would be an example of what you can see. Okay, as you can see, real basic, straightforward. The process is really simple. You can get, very basic scripts or very complex scripts, and MP Author makes it very simple to add those in. And so at this point, I'm ready to take any Q&A that's available.
That was great, Kevin. Thank you. And please don't forget to complete the survey as well. You can see the link down there. We appreciate your participation. All right, you've got a few questions here, Kevin. So let's start with Richard's question. He asks, is there any guidance on what event IDs to use or avoid for SCOM MP authoring?
So not really, and I'll explain why. So I'll go through here and refresh this since this has been running in my environment for a while, and we can see that I just chose 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're always going to write script when we choose log script event API. We're always going to log this as the source health service script, so you don't really get much leeway there. And as far as the event IDs, the only scenario that would be bad is if somebody wrote a management pack that was looking for like event ID 1, 2, 3, 4 and health service script source, and they, we chose that same ID for our custom script. We might generate alerts that some other management pack is looking in the Ops Manager event log for. So the problem is we don't really have a section where we say reserved or for customer or not for customer. So honestly, I think it just comes down to picking some event IDs that you like to use for your custom scripts and then incrementing from there. The best practice would be to make sure that when you write your rules that are looking for your events, that you do something like parameter 1 equals like a script, so you can get a little bit more descriptive in the data source for if you were going to generate alerts off of that, and that would make sure that other management pack authors don't trigger your rules that look for that.
That's great. Thanks, Kevin.
Is there another question?
Yeah, there's a few more actually. We've got one here from Ben. He asks, how would one create a computer group in MP authoring rather than an instance group?
Ooh, I haven't actually come across that before. So when we go to create a target and we create a new group, yeah, we probably only have one group type. So I can tell you the difference between a computer group and an instance group is very minimal. I'm actually a big fan of not creating computer groups. I like to create instance groups, and the reason being is a computer group is essentially an instance group that simply has a relationship that says, hey, this is going to contain computers, but then it creates a roll-up dependency roll-up monitor that rolls up the health of all the objects and rolls that up to the state of the group itself. So that's the real benefit of using computer groups, is only if you want that state to enact that state for something that you're going to use elsewhere. I think a lot of people create computer groups not realizing that that state rollup exists, and then that just adds load for health calculation on the management servers. So if it's something that you want, then I think you would probably have to do that at the XML layer, because I don't believe that MP Author gives an option for that. I don't know if there's somebody online from Silect that could answer that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. Another question that's come in. Tony asks, is there a limit to the number of variables you can pass through a property bag?
As far as the output of the number of variables, I'm not aware of a limit. I think it would be odd to have a huge number, but I don't know if there's a limit.
Okay, fair enough.
Do we know how many we're talking about?
Well,
10, 20, 5,000?
Tony can type that in the chat box. I can let you know. Maybe we can get back.
Okay.
Great.
Just a general question.
Sure, sure. So Tyson asks, can a PowerShell script be run to assist with the discovery of an Snmp device, such as changing the device's name if the sysname OID is not available? That's a mouthful.
Yeah, that I would imagine that's possible. We still, if for a network device to be discovered, we still have to have and use the network discovery. But at the end of the day, those are modules that get loaded. So I've heard this issue where we discover network devices and we don't discover the appropriate name, and customers want to change that. When the name's not available. I don't know that running a PowerShell-based discovery would be the right method. It may be a matter of changing the way that we do discoveries, but I've read about that, and I've heard customers come up with solutions, but certainly not a PowerShell discovery written in NP Author.
Okay, thank you. One last question here from Diego, and he asks, can he run NP Author from Windows 7, or does it have to be, and I believe he's referring to Windows Server.
So it'll run from Windows 7 or Windows Server. I'm running it on Windows Server 2012 right here,
okay.
But I also use it on Windows 7 and Windows 8. I assume it works on Windows 10 client, but I haven't tested that yet.
Okay. You have time for one more?
Sure.
Kevin, it's Mike Sargent.
Yep. Go ahead.
Kevin, it's Mike Sargent from Select here. We've done some testing on Windows 10. Seems to be working.
Great.
Great. That's good to know. Thanks, Mike. Okay, let's do one more then. Kevin asks, can I save the property bag output to use again in next run of script?
So you certainly could. So I assume we want to compare like the previous value so that we can then know that if something changed. There's a couple different ways to do that. So when it comes to performance data, if we're using like a monitor, we actually save that in memory by default, and then for the next run of the script, we can compare that. So we use that for consecutive samples monitors and delta monitors. But let's say that you're writing your own script and you want to persist that data and compare it yourself. There are some modules that you can run that are part of the MOM script API that will actually give you the ability to write to the registry, or you can output the data to a file, like create a temporary file, and then use the data that you write to that file to compare. I've seen both of those scenarios before.
Great, thank you. Looks to be about the last one there. Appreciate that, Kevin. Great presentation. Thank you very much.